Week after week now, I have obviously made it very clear that I check every single box. I have done everything for you, man. Presence? Great television? Friendship? And to top it off, last week, I gave you the best segment of your whole entire career, and the world the best segment in the history of all professional wrestling.
Welcome to this week's edition of Talk AEW, the AEW podcast from goombastomp.com and tiltmagazine.net. I'm your host, Ian Goodwillie, and we're here today with Ricky D, the editor-in-chief of both Tilt Magazine and Goobastomp. Hi, Ricky.
What's up, Ian? Just to quickly remind listeners, you can find the podcast over at goombastomp.com. Just click the wrestling tab on the navigation bar, and you can listen to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and I'm pretty sure Stitcher. There's a few more places. And, of course, on the actual website. You can leave us a comment on the website, support our website by just visiting the website. Support us and the podcast by visiting the website, spread the word, and I guess that's about it, really.
So in the main event today, we're going to talk about Dark versus Dynamite. But first off, we want to talk about MJF joining the Inner Circle, this whole angle that's going on right now. Ricky, what do you feel about this?
I'm excited and I'm nervous. And here's the thing. So first of all, when it comes to AEW, I would say like out of my 10 favorite wrestlers, 5 are involved in this storyline. So there's Chris Jericho, there's Sammy Guevara, there's MJF, there's Wardlow, and I kind of like Santana Ortiz. I consider them like a tag team, so really it's 6 superstars. I think they can really, they could do something really special in that MJF, because like MJF is like such a superstar. Like even though he's young and AEW's only been around for a year, they pretty much have built him and built him to be the future of the company. Like he's going to be the heel of AEW. You know, I don't think he's ever going to become a babyface. Maybe not. But if like it doesn't make sense that he's begging Chris Jericho to join his group. Like I know it's Jericho, but MJF, his character, like his whole shtick is that he thinks he's the absolute best. He is the total package, right? And so I get his explanation this week about how he says the one sort of like not really flaw, but the one thing he needs to work on is teamwork. So it explains why he wants to join the Inner Circle. And also he said in the past that he doesn't really get the shots because it seems like AEW favors a faction over like wrestlers who are just like lone wolves type thing. Although, you know, he does have Wardlow. So, anyway, I'm rambling, but the point is, what if the whole thing is a setup? What if he's paying off the Inner Circle and they turned their back on Chris Jericho? Or what if it leads to Sammy G leaving Inner Circle, having a feud with Chris Jericho, and Wardlow splits with MJF and they have a feud? Because they're clearly, eventually, one day soon, going to have a match with MJF and Wardlow.
Well, they've definitely been setting that up for a while now. They've been building the rift between the two of them. There's a certain inevitability to it. My feeling on it is it's fairly similar to yours. I think the end result of this is Chris Jericho being booted out of the Inner Circle and MJF taking over. I can't. There was a question during that whole Q&A thing they did this week. There were a lot of the questions seemed to be directed essentially towards, I mean, outside of Peter Avalon's, of course, about can you guys really trust each other? And the reality is, of course they can't. They're the two biggest heels in the company. It's absurd that they even think that, like, no one believes they're going to be able to work together. I mean, Cody thought he could trust MJF. That was obviously a mistake. The same thing's going to happen again. And my expectation is we'll see MJF not just in the Inner Circle, but leading the Inner Circle, and Chris Jericho out on his own. And possibly, even given that Sammy Guevara seems to really hate the dude, maybe he'll follow Chris. I think there's just an end game to this that I think it's going to be a more interesting end game than any of us see it being. But at the same time, I I just don't want to see guys like Sammy and Wardlow left out in the cold when this all comes to an end, because how long has it been since we've seen Santana and Ortiz wrestle a tag team match? Like, honestly, have they wrestled a tag team match since they had that 5-star match with Best Friends? I honestly don't remember at this point. So we kind of need to get to a point where these guys, it's nice seeing them in this really cool faction, but they're also great wrestlers, and we need to see them doing more of that too. So I think we need to push forward with this, and I think the thing that makes the least sense to me in all this right now is the idea that it was inevitably going to be settled in a match. It was going to be Chris Jericho versus MJF, but it makes no sense for Jericho to say, to get in my faction, you have to prove you're better than me. Why would he want somebody in the faction that's better than him? Like, it's like he's asking MJF to take over at this point.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the storyline is a great idea. The concept is great. You need to find clever ways to use guys like MJF and Wardlow and Chris Jericho and Sammy G, etc., even Jake Hager, when they are not, say, wrestling for the heavyweight championship. So yeah, but it's more of like the dialogue that's problematic, right? So it's like,
Agreed.
In terms of like the script, like the plot, the idea, the storyline is great. It's more of like the dialogue and what they've decided to choose to say. So, like, for example, last week with the musical, a lot of people didn't like the musical, and a lot of people loved it. Some people think it's the greatest thing that's ever happened in AEW. Some people think it's the worst thing that's ever happened, and a lot of people think it's the worst thing that's ever happened because they think it harms MJF's character. What's weird is MJF, the actual person, it was his idea. It wasn't Chris Jericho's idea. So everyone blames Jericho, like, oh, Jericho's trying to ruin MJF, but no, it was MJF's idea. He actually originally chose a song from Elton John, and Chris Jericho was like, okay, we can do it, but I do not want to do an Elton John song. I want to do an old school, like, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin kind of song. So they got the permission from the Frank Sinatra estate, and they got the song, and they actually apparently filmed it and edited it while Dynamite was actually being filmed. And so, from my understanding, it was done, like, completed, like, the final product 22 minutes before they needed to air it. So that's pretty insane. Anyhow, all that to say, that was MJF's idea. So I think, like, it's more of the the dialogue in the script. And so you're right, it doesn't make sense for Chris Jericho to challenge MJF. It would have made sense if it was the reverse. If MJF said, hey, Chris, what if I challenge you, and if I beat you, I join the Inner Circle? It's a very simple, not correction, but an edit, right? Like, you have your script writers, your screenplay writers, and you have someone, like, proofread it, and you have someone provide ideas and feedback, and then you just make a simple change. And that simple change would sort of, like, solve a huge problem, because what you're saying is absolutely right. And then at the same time, you have Sammy G, and I don't know if it was Santana or Ortiz, I'm all confused now. One of them is okay with, well, not okay, but he doesn't really care if he joins the Inner Circle.
Yeah, that's Santana. Santana's
right?
The one
and
who's,
Ortiz is
and Ortiz is like, roar.
Exactly. And so, like, it's just like I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm like, well, if nobody wants him in the Inner Circle, and Chris Jericho clearly can't get along with MJF, then what's the point? Like, it's like they still haven't actually, like, they had a town hall meeting, and in the town hall meeting, as fun as it was to watch, and I love seeing Tony Schiavone tell Jericho to shut up, you know, and having Peter Avalon show up and Eric Bischoff, but they didn't really provide the audience with an actual solid reason and what's the word I'm looking for? Not motivation, but, well, I guess sort of motivation too, but a motive. Like, why does Jericho want him so bad? Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense why MJF is so bad. Like, and this is the thing, we don't know. We can't look into the future. We do not know what they have planned. So maybe if MJF screws Jericho and he takes over the Inner Circle, okay, fine, it would work. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think what's going to happen is they're going to set up a feud between Sammy G and Jericho, and then Wardlow and MJF. I think that's the end result. And in between, we're going to have Jericho versus MJF, Sammy G versus MJF. Like, I don't know.
I think it comes down to, this is either going to be MJF taking over the Inner Circle, or it's the end of the Inner Circle. It's hard to imagine this working out well, and because the Inner Circle has worked because of the dynamic of those 5 guys. If they upset that, I don't see how it continues. I mean, it doesn't take much to take a faction that works and just switch one even part of it and watch it literally come apart. So I feel like by building these rifts, they have to be building towards the end of the inner circle. If they're not, I'm very confused about where this is going. But like you said, we can't see the future. We don't know what's going to happen. I think in particular that the town hall segment made things a lot more confusing because there was no real substantial point to it. It was just a series of gag questions. It was all a setup to get Eric Bischoff to come out and call Jericho a prima donna. There was no new information given. The only real end result of it was setting up these two matches, the tag team match this week and then the match between Jericho and MJF at the pay-per-view. Like, there's no other real goal to it. Like, we didn't learn anything from it. There was no real new information. And similarly, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Le Dinner Debonair. I thought it was amazing. I'm firmly in the camp it was great, but it didn't really add anything to the story either. Like, it was great for what it was. It was amazing, and the fact that they're finishing it while the show is on the air, good for them that they got that knocked out like that. Like, I mean, that's a rough timeline, but they pulled it off. But I mean, in the end, what did we actually learn from it? Like, how did it help build the feud? All we really learned is that they're very similar people, which kind of just furthers the idea that they can't get along in a group. So maybe it's a good thing that they haven't telegraphed where this is going, maybe because in the end, if we don't know, then it's not too predictable and we'll see what happens. But it just, in my mind, I don't see this ending with the inner circle intact, at least as we know it now.
Well, you see, but that's the thing. That's why it makes a good segment, because we do not know. Like, I thought the biggest flaw of Dynamite this week was we knew what would happen. We knew the results. We knew it would end up being Hangman Page versus Kenny Omega. There wasn't any big surprises on Dynamite this week. Like, it was an okay show. There were, like, especially the first match was fantastic. Eddie Kingston was fantastic. There were some really big moments, but overall, I feel like it's too predictable. And so this is what I like about the storyline. So I do have a sort of like gripe, and I can nitpick about the specific writing and the dialogue and what Jericho and MJF are saying, and I think that's a very easy fix. But I do not know where it's going. And all I know is that I'm really excited because I think my favorite wrestler is Sammy G. Like, it's weird because I remember I started watching Dynamite week 3, went back and watched week 1 and 2 afterwards, and then he was actually the first match with Cody. And I remember the first time I saw Sammy G, I was like, wow, this guy's like, he's got the look. He could do like these 900 flips from the top rope. You know, like, he could be a really good heel, but I could see him being a really good babyface. The ladies seem to love him. He's a good-looking dude. I love the way he dresses. You know, like, one of my main problems with AEW, like the roster, is a lot of people they need a complete makeover, right? Not Sammy G, right? And so I was like, this guy's great. And so I've been a huge fan of him ever since I started watching the AEW Dynamite. And so in the past year, it seemed like he was losing week after week after week. And so now he has the beef or the feud with Matt Hardy. I think the feud's going to be fantastic. We could talk about next week when we do our full gear predictions. But the fact that it's going to be filmed at the Hardy Boy complex, and it's going to be very cinematic, and so they can control the environment and basically the entire match. I don't think we're going to have any big scare moments like the last time they wrestled, right?
I hope not.
All this to say is, if this is going to be a way to give Sammy the push he needs and Wardlow the push he needs, then to me it's a good thing. Because MJF and Chris Jericho are already sitting at the top of AEW, but those two guys have potential to be right up there with them. Like I said this last week, and I'll say it again, I think when it comes to the big guys, I think Wardlow is by far the best in the roster. Like, yes, I like Brian Cage. Yes, Lance Archer is cool. But you know what? They're not really doing much with these dudes. Like, even Miro comes in, and I wish Mariko was here because I still do not like his storyline. Like, he complained about WWE not letting him do whatever he wanted to do, and he didn't have any creative freedom. And it seems like in AEW, he has creative freedom. And I'm like, well, maybe that's a mistake. I said this last week. Some wrestlers, they need guidance, and they need an editor. They need someone to provide feedback, and then they need someone to be like, hey, you know what? This isn't a really good storyline. Like, it seems like an inside joke. It's like, you like video games, you have a Twitch channel, okay, but how does this really fit into the world of wrestling? For me, it's a stupid storyline, right? Whereas the Chris Jericho MJF is a great way to build up a feud. And who knows, maybe MJF will join the Inner Circle, and maybe he'll be happy somehow with working alongside Chris Jericho for like maybe the next like few weeks or few months, and then eventually it'll just explode. We don't know. All we know is that for some reason we have a match at Full Gear, and if he beats Jericho, like you said, it makes no sense, because basically then he should be the alpha dog and the leader, because he just beat the leader. So if he's going to join the Inner Circle by beating the leader, then Jericho shouldn't be the leader. And he did say, I'm going to do everything and anything to win, and he repeated it, which means, I don't know, expect something big, expect interference, expect Santana Ortiz to turn on Jericho, expect Sammy G to turn on Jericho.
I think everybody's going to turn on everybody. What I want out of this more than anything else is I'm a huge fan of Santana and Ortiz. I love them as a tag team. I think they're great, but they need a chance. I think they're like Sammy G. I think they're like everything you just said about, I think applies to them too. They as a team, they need to get a push. They need to do something, and just following Chris around is not enough. And that's when they're given a chance to shine. They walked out there with best friends, and those two teams put on a 5-star match. Those are the teams I care about seeing. I don't care about the Young Bucks versus FTR. I genuinely don't care. I care about watching guys like Best Friends and Santana and Ortiz go at it. That's what I want out of AEW. I'm looking forward to whatever that happens with this, whether the Inner Circle stays or goes, whatever happens, push them. Get them in the tag team division. Even this coming week, they've got this beef match between MJF and Wardlow and Ortiz and Sammy. Why isn't it Ortiz and Santana? They're the actual tag team. Or for a while there, they were pushing like Sammy and Chris as a tag team, and then they were briefly pushing Jake Hager and Chris Jericho as a tag team, but they weren't pushing the actual tag team that's in the Inner Circle. It's so confusing to me. And I just want to see them get out there. I want to see them get more title shots. I want to see them frankly, I just want to see them wrestle even. That would be great. So I'll be happy to see Ortiz in the ring this week, but I want to see Santana and Ortiz together in the ring doing what they do best, and that's being one of the best tag teams around.
I did hear a rumor that AEW wants to introduce a triple tag team championship belt.
Like a trios belt kind of thing?
Like a trios belt, yeah.
Well, I've been wondering why they haven't been looking at that for a while. They've had so many trios running around. Like, I mean, it's the only reason to leave Marco Stunt with Jurassic Express is to have a trio. SCU's been a trio since day one. Like, you could take basically any 3 members of Inner Circle, make a trio. There's tons of trios all over AEW. They could do it. I honestly think I'd prefer to see a women's tag team championship before a trios belt. Just simply because I'd like to see them put more effort into their women's division, as we were talking about last week. But also, their trios belts can be interesting, but it's hard enough sometimes to find 2 people that gel together. Finding a third can be borderline impossible on some occasions.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not interested in a trio tag team championship. I just don't see it being like a hit.
Do they have time for it? I don't see how they'd fit that in.
I don't think so. And like even if you had 4 teams, you've already used up 12 wrestlers.
Exactly. Great point.
And so like you're gonna use up some of your superstars. Like you're gonna use MJF and Wardlow, who are gonna team up with Sammy G versus like Jake Hager and Santana Ortiz. Like I'm not hip on that idea. Like I personally do not like this idea. I hope it's just a rumor and it doesn't actually come true. But all that to say, look, I'm excited to see what happens between MJF and Chris Jericho. I believe the end result is going to be fantastic because I believe in Jericho. Like, I think Jericho has been in the business for 30 years for a reason, because he is one of the best at creating promos and storylines and pushing wrestlers over, and he's just fantastic. So I have faith in Jericho, and MJF is just amazing. He's proven to be the absolute best. The thing is, I guess to wrap up the segment on my end, if I can choose, like, if I can write the script, right? If I could take over and write the script, what I would do, is I would break up the Inner Circle by having MJF take over. And when I say break up, I would just remove Sammy and make Sammy a babyface. And remove Jericho. So then it would be Jake Hager, MJF, Wardlow, Santana, Ortiz. But I don't know what you would do with Jericho. But I'm not really worried because Jericho's Jericho. I just can't see Jericho and MJF working side by side in the Inner Circle. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting. Who knows? I don't know.
I have two thoughts that come out of that. Number one, can you imagine how cool it would be? Like, you take somebody like MJF, who's obviously this incredible heel, and this is more a behind the scenes comment. Put him under the learning tree of Chris Jericho. Like, what he would pick up from him, what he would bring to his game with that kind of like, we're working on this storyline together. They are right now, but as they continually build that storyline, it could be very good for MJF and seizing him as a wrestler because he's a young dude. But you put him under that learning tree even for a few months, yeah, he'll come out even a better performer than he is now. But the other thing is, I'm with you on Sammy Guevara turning face, and the whole feud with Matt Hardy started with Matt wanting to mentor Sammy. What if this led to Sammy in that position, like Matt Hardy mentoring him and him in sort of a pseudo alliance with Private Party?
That's what I think is going to happen. I really think Sammy's going to turn into a babyface.
I think it'll look great on him. I think he's done great work as a heel. There's some guys that you could just look at and you go, you know what? You're great as a heel or you're great as a face, but you'd be better as the opposite. For me, I think he's been a great heel. I think he'd be an amazing face. I think as the guy the crowd is rooting for, I think he's built to soak up that adulation. His character, everything you said about him before, his look, everything, agreed 100%. He's like The Rock to me in that way, where even when The Rock was bad, people still loved him. When he's a face, it's amazing because The Rock was just built to soak up the cheers of the people around him, and it always looked so good on him. And I think Sammy's the same way. With him standing, he gets in the ring, he gets up on that top turnbuckle, and he preaches to the crowd, and they're all cheering for him. That will look so good on him.
Yeah, he's got the YouTube channel. He's got a following. He might have the biggest following. And the thing about Sammy is like he's about 26, 27 years old, but he comes across as someone who's 21. He's very young at heart. He's gullible. You know what I mean? Like, I think he needs to become a babyface, and I think he needs his best friends to turn on him for him to sort of find the edge, I don't know, he needs to be, what's the word I'm looking for? That je ne sais quoi, to get the fire out of him, to bring him to life, to really, like, make him, like, a beast, right? Like a killer. Because right now he just comes across as this guy who has a lot of talent in the ring, and he's really, really fun to watch, but he doesn't have that killer instinct. So he needs someone to really, like, turn on him, like emotionally, not physically, right? For him to find.
No, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, I think you're absolutely right. You're totally right about that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I think he would be a fantastic babyface. And like, look, year 2 is clearly going to be the year of the cleaner, Kenny Omega. So whatever Jon Moxley did in year 1, basically it's going to be replaced with Kenny Omega. We can guarantee that Moxley is going to lose the championship belt soon. Kenny Omega will soon be the new champion. And so they're going to have, they're going to be busy with like Kenny Omega is basically going to rule that whole any storylines that revolve around the championship belt, right? And so you're not going to have room for MJF and Sammy right away. Like, they're going to focus on those guys, Hangman, Kenny, whoever, like maybe Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley for a while. You don't have room to put MJF, Jericho, Sammy, and even Jake Hager in any sort of like position where they are going to fight for the heavyweight championship belt. Which is a good thing because they're so good on the microphone and they have all these great storylines that revolve around them. You can find you can keep them busy in different storylines that are just as entertaining, if not more.
Hey, maybe it's time for Jericho to move into that management/commentary position we were talking about.
Well, and he's doing commentary next week again.
There you go. All right. When we come back after the break, we'll be going into the main event, talking about Dark versus Dynamite. Stay tuned.
Now, I love MJF, don't get me wrong. He's great. But you don't have to be a dentist, which I am, to see that he has a terrible track record when it comes to friendships in AEW. So how does that make you feel, Le Champion?
Well, I mean, that's a valid point, and I'm very aware of MJF's past here in AEW, but I'm not a dipshit like Cody, so we're not actually letting MJF into our inner circle, no pun intended. He knows nothing about our strategies, about our plans, about the secrets that we have, and besides, if you try and turn on us, we'll knock your frickin' teeth down your throat.
Okay, whoa. Let's all settle down, people. I know it's exciting. Come on, guys. I would never turn on any of you. We all got into this great profession for the same reason, right? Money and championships. And I am promising you, all of us together as one, we're going to get a whole lot of green and a whole lot of go.
Welcome back to Talk AEW, the Goomba Stomp and Tilt Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Ian Goodwillie, and we're here today with the editor-in-chief of both Goomba Stomp and Tilt Magazine, Ricky D.
What's up, Ian?
Now, it's time for the main event. Now, every week, AEW is kind enough to bring us 2 different wrestling programs. Of course, there is AEW Dynamite, their flagship show that airs every Wednesday, but as well, every Tuesday they drop a new episode of AEW Dark. Now, I don't know about a lot of other people, but for me, I've generally been growing to prefer AEW Dark to AEW Dynamite. Ricky, what is your feelings on this?
I'm not going to go so far as to say that Dark is better than Dynamite, but I think it does some things better than Dynamite. I do enjoy Dark. Here's the thing. When I watch Dynamite, even if it's pre-recorded, because of COVID, they're clearly pre-recording a lot of the episodes, and you know this because, for example, sometimes you'll hear about so-and-so is supposed to wrestle, but they don't wrestle. It's because there was an injury and they were filming back-to-back, and so they had to, change at the last minute, right? So, but the point is, when I watch Dynamite, I still feel like I'm watching a wrestling program live. Even if there's only 500 people in the crowd, even if there's no one in the crowd, I still feel the excitement. When I watch Dark, it feels like it's pre-recorded, it's uploaded to the internet, and I wish they would find a way to make it seem like we're watching something on TV live. And it's the way they transition from match to match. It's I don't know. It has to do with the production values, the editing, and just the overall direction. So I think they can and should fix that, and I think it's an easy fix. Once again, but the thing about Dark, you don't get commercials. You don't get picture-in-picture, and there's a lot of times living in Canada that we don't even get picture-in-picture, so we just get a commercial, we miss a big, huge spot. And so you come back from commercial, and you're like, well, what the hell just happened? You know what I mean? What the hell? And so Dark has the advantage that it doesn't play commercials, and they can go as long as they want. So it used to be 45 minutes, and it was an hour, and it was an hour and 15 minutes, and now it's 2 hours and 8 minutes. And they can go the extra 8 minutes because it's on YouTube. And the great thing about Dark is you can really watch it whenever you want to watch it, but I still watch it live, or at least I try every week on Tuesdays. So that's my biggest issue with Dark. I just wish that they can find a way to fix it so it feels like I'm watching a wrestling promotion live and not a program that's uploaded to YouTube.
It's hard to argue with that. I mean, the reality is they don't put the same effort into producing the show. I think there's a certain something to that show that I enjoy. I really like Excalibur and Taz on commentary, in part because it's almost anything goes there. They seem like they're having a good time. They'll randomly bring in Ricky Starks or Brandy, or somebody will just jump in on commentary with them for a match or two, and the dynamic shifts up. They had Veda Scott on with them for a while. I think they need to bring her back. I thought the dynamic of the three of them was great. But I honestly, a lot of times, I enjoy the matches I get on Dark more because I get to see guys that I'm a big fan of, guys like Lee Johnson and Aaron Solo and Sean Dean get in the ring. And they're all talented wrestlers, none of whom have a single win yet in AEW, which is a absolute crime. But that's how they built up Will Hobbs, too. I'm a big fan of Will Hobbs, and I want to see them do more with him. I like this sort of growing partnership between him and Darby Allin that's kind of coming up on Dynamite now, but they built him up through Dark. And I think when you watch Dark, what you're seeing is the first generation of AEW stars they're building. Because, I mean, obviously there's a lot of former WWE guys at the top of AEW right now, and we've seen that. And there's also a lot of guys who have long careers already. Guys like Young Bucks and Adam Page and Kenny Omega, guys who haven't been in AEW, but obviously incredibly successful careers. They were names before they got to AEW. But what you're seeing on Dark is you're literally seeing them build that first generation of talent that maybe people don't like. How many people knew Shawn Dean or Lee Johnson before this? I didn't. And this is where you're seeing AEW's first crop of their talent coming from. And I enjoy that aspect of it. Sometimes when I tune in, like when Chris Jericho and Dean Ambrose, I said Dean Ambrose because I was about to say Chris Jericho and Jon Moxley were feuding on Dynamite, I was like, well, I saw this feud already when it was Chris Jericho and Dean Ambrose in WWE. Like, I'm not against seeing them wrestle. I love them both, but this is just kind of retreading trodden ground for me. Whereas I tune into Dark and I see these guys that I'm genuinely excited about. I mean, they had that new tag team on this week, Top Flight, I think their name was, and I don't know them, and they were bloody amazing. Loved them. I pushed them. They were great, and that's why I love about Dark. I love the energy of it. I love the fact that it feels a little bit more like just on the fly. I love the feeling of watching these new younger talent getting a chance to show off, and I can't wait to see some of them get that win. So I think that's why I love watching Dark.
Yeah, so again, like, the thing about Dark, and I said this last week, and I'm pushing back here, playing devil's advocate, is I wish it had a championship belt. Like, it could be the equivalent of the Intercontinental Championship. It could be the Women's Tag Team Championship. It could be whatever. I just wish there was an actual championship in Dark, right? And, like, not a championship belt that's specifically and only for Dark. Like, I'm not trying to split the brands like the blue brand and the red brand and the gold brand, right, like WWE. I'm just saying that, typically, normally, usually, you would expect if they're going to wrestle for so-and-so championship, it's going to happen on Dark. Just like if they're going to wrestle for the TNT championship, it's going to happen on Dynamite, right? It makes sense. It's the TV championship. It's basically WCW's TV title. It's now like what Cody has over his shoulders. It's the TNT. What is it called? Is it called the TNT Championship?
Yeah, it is literally called the AEW
yeah.
TNT Championship.
Right.
Yeah.
So if they can polish up the show to make it seem like it's actually recorded live, if they can give us a championship belt that guys like Ricky Starks or Will Hobbs can actually try to, win, right? Like, actually create storylines around these championship belts. Like, I think that could help. This week I thought the highlight of AEW the highlight of AEW this week was the Dark Order Halloween party, okay, which was on BT, which was amazing. But apart from the Dark Order Halloween party, the highlight of AEW this week was actually watching Peter Avalon and Cutler wrestle.
Oh, that was great.
Finally, Cutler wins a match, and Peter Avalon loses the match, and he loses the girl. And then he shows up on Dynamite trying to beg and sneak his way into the Inner Circle, which I thought was hilarious, right?
That was great.
Yeah, because they think, like, a guy like Peter Avalon, like, no offense to Peter Avalon, he's never going to be a champion. He's never going to hold, I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think he's ever going to have a championship belt over his shoulder. But they still find great ways to use these dudes, right? Not everyone has to be a beast. Not everyone has to be extremely charismatic. Not everyone has to be good looking, because that would be boring. And what would you do? Like, if everyone was like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels in WWE, like, it just wouldn't be the same, because those guys wouldn't stand out. They wouldn't be special because everyone's like them, right? If everyone's like The Undertaker, it would be boring. So
fair enough.
I like how they use these dudes who normally wouldn't even get a shot in a place like WWE. Marco Stunt, I come down really hard on Marco Stunt. I just don't like to see Marco Stunt with Jungle Boy. I prefer Jungle Boy. I prefer Jungle Boy with Luchasaurus. I prefer Jungle Boy in singles matches. I actually like watching Marco Stunt more when he's with Sammy, in the YouTube channel. And Sammy's like my favorite wrestler, so I don't necessarily want Marco Stunt to be paired with Sammy on television, but I'm just saying, like, I like their chemistry better. It works and it makes more sense, right? As opposed to pairing him up with a Jungle Boy who resembles Tarzan and a dinosaur who has like a master's degree.
He does not fit that gimmick at all. He just doesn't.
He does
honestly
not.
You know what I would like to see? This complete aside, we're not specifically talking about Marco here. I would like to see them honestly try Marco on commentary just once. Give him a couple of shots on commentary. See how he does. I'm more than anything just curious. I'd like to see how he sounds because he does have charisma. Like he is. I like the dude. I'm honestly uncomfortable when they put him in the ring with a big guy and the big guy just starts throwing him around. Like it's not a match I enjoy. It's not really a match. It's just watching the guy get decimated, and I don't enjoy that. I think that guy's got charisma. I think he's got better mic skills than he's been allowed to show so far. I just like to see him throw him on commentary a couple times, even just on Dark. Throw him on there with Taz and Excalibur. See what happens. I'm just kind of curious more than anything else.
I think it'll be hilarious. I think are you watching his whole storyline with Sammy G now on Sammy's channel?
No, I haven't.
Him and Sammy are best friends, and so whenever Sammy gets close to another wrestler, like when he gets, if Sammy gets buddy with whoever, he gets jealous, like super jealous. It's really funny to watch. Like I actually like the thing is, I used to watch Sammy's YouTube channel like last year, and I stopped because I just found it really annoying. And it didn't really go anywhere, and it didn't really tie into the actual Dynamite or the storylines on TV. But now they're actually trying to find clever ways to tie in the storylines to BT and also the storylines to actual Dark and on Dynamite. So I think it's like it's improved. Sammy's channel is clearly improved, and I don't know if he has someone helping him with camera work and editing, but it's really like shot up a notch in like production value. Anyhow, back to Dark. I mean, I don't really know what to say. Like, I feel like you've said it all. Like, the fun in watching Dark is watching these wrestlers who we've never heard of, or maybe heard of but never actually seen because we don't have access to whatever wrestling promotion that airs in whatever TV network in the States that we don't get here in Canada, right? And so, like, you hear about these guys who wrestle in New York, and you finally get a chance to see them, and they're on and they appear on Dark, and every now and then they'll bring on a wrestler who's not necessarily signed a contract with AEW, but they're sort of like testing out the wrestler to see, like, gauge like how much interest the audience has and how they work backstage with the talent that is already hired at AEW and so on and so forth. So to me, it's like a testing ground. And I just wish that AEW would stop using it as a testing ground and actually take it serious, because there are people like you and me and Mariko who actually really do enjoy Dark. And so I think they are slowly starting to take it a bit more serious because now they've extended it and it's longer. But I'm really interested to see what happens come December or January, because we talked about this last week where Cody said that they will soon make an announcement in which they're going to add a 1 hour show. And so that 1 hour show could actually kill any possibility of them improving Dark.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. That could be an unintended side effect of it. I think there's a few things I have. Like, following up on your point, I've heard of her before. I've seen mention of her before. But Layla Hirsch on both Dark and Dynamite, she lost both those matches. She was bloody amazing, though. Like, she is a beast, and I am all in on her. I want to see her around more. I've heard her name. I've seen clips of her on YouTube. But these are the first, like, matches I've seen her wrestle. I'm sold. I think she's fantastic. I think she's a beast, and I want to see her in the ring more. But I'm also, at the same time, I need to be clear off the top. I don't dislike Matt Sydal. I liked Matt Sydal. I liked him in his Evan Bourne days. I've liked him ever since. He's a 20-year veteran. Love his work in the ring. But I don't like seeing Lee Johnson and Sean Dean being used to job to him. Like, these guys have been around AEW a lot longer than he has. Like, he sort of just showed up and is pinning these guys who I think are the future of the company, where who knows how long Matt Sydal's going to be around.
Well, they seem to be giving him a push because he had a match with Eddie Kingston, and Eddie won, but he did not win the match easily.
But this is the thing. I don't care about Matt Sydal's push at all.
No.
Like, he just suddenly shows up and he has this push. I'm like, why aren't you pushing Sean Dean like this? Like, put Sean Dean and I can't remember what they're at this point, but both Sean Dean and Lee Johnson are closing in, if not over 20 losses. Neither of them have a victory. Aaron Solo had a big gap in the performance there. He's only got a handful of losses, but no wins either. He's extremely talented as well. And I'd extend that to Kylan King too. I quite like her. I think she's talented. They need to start pushing these talents over the flavor of the week from, like, okay, we signed Matt Sydal. People know who he is. Let's push him over these guys. And I'm like, that's a mistake to me. Like, I want to see more from these other guys. And I feel like that's what Dark should be using for. Like, at some point, these guys have to start winning. Otherwise, why are they there? Like, they can't. They're Sean Dean, Lee Johnson, Aaron Solo, Kylan King. These are all wrestlers that are way too good to be jobbers. Like, they're so good in the ring. They need to be given a chance to actually take it to the next level. And like you said, like another belt on Dark might be the way to help that. I would say also Dark, given the fact that they seem to be willing to go over 2 hours with it at this point, they should be using the time to build a women's tag team division on Dark. Like they had a couple of 2 or 3 great women's matches on Dark. Start building some tag teams. Give Ivelisse and Diamante some competition. Give them some belts to chase. This is the time and place to do it. It's Dark. It's there. It's ready for it. That could be the big hook of Dark. Could be those championships.
Will Hobbs, I don't think has won a match, or has he?
No, he's won a few matches. They after he did well in that one buy-in, whatever the hell it was, tournament. He's picked up a few victories. I think he won this week on Dark, didn't he?
You know what? You're right. Yeah, he did. But Sean Dean hasn't won a match.
No, Sean Dean has not won a match. Lee Johnson has not won a match. Aaron Solo has not won a match. And to the best of my recollection, neither has Kylan King. And like, we're talking in the case of like specifically Lee Johnson and Sean Dean, counting tag team matches. It's a lot of matches they've lost without a single victory. And what's funny to me is they've made this huge deal out of Brandon Cutler and Peter Avalon not winning a match, yet they've got all these other talents that also have never won a match. Like, it needs to happen. And every week, commentary says the same thing about these guys. Oh, they have huge upsides. They're just looking for that one victory, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Well, you said that last week too, and the week before, and the week before, and the week before. At some point, the referee if you're going to invest in these guys, the referee will actually have to raise their hands in the air and declare them the victor of a match at some point. Or what's going to happen is WWE is going to swoop in and sign them like they did that Ben Carter guy. And they're going to bring them into NXT, and maybe they'll figure out, like, it's WWE. God only knows if they'll actually use them or not, but another company, NWA, Ring of Honor, freaking Impact, New Japan, someone is going to watch these guys week in, week out, putting great performances on Dark that are losing efforts, but still great performances, and go, you know what? We can make something out of this guy and sign them before AEW figures out what they've got on their hands.
You see, I don't really care if they win a match or don't win a match on Dark. Like, I get what you're saying, but I care if they get screen time. And to me, Dark is a training camp. It's a training ground. It's a way to promote and test the wrestlers and storylines and see where they go, and eventually end up on Dynamite and on live TV and in front of a bigger audience, and like, that's what I care about. So, like, for me, I had a problem with Sammy not winning a match on Dynamite for an entire year because he's Sammy and he's like one of the best wrestlers on the roster. When I look at Dark, I don't really care, but the problem is because they keep track of the wins and losses, which at first seemed like a really cool idea, and now a year later seems like a really bad idea for 2 reasons. Number one, they don't really care about the wins and losses because you have a guy like Eddie Kingston who walks in and right away gets a title championship shot. You have a guy like Lance Archer who walks in and right away gets a shot at the belt. You have a guy like Brian Cage who walks in and right away is like fighting Jon Moxley. So what's the point in the rankings? Because now you have like a tournament to find out who's gonna fight Moxley, next. Like, so, like, again, what's the point in the rankings? And then second of all, it puts an emphasis and highlights how many matches they've won and lost. So if a guy hasn't won a match, it's every single time he comes to the ring, like, his record is 14-0, 15-0, 16-0, 7. So it's constantly reminding us, the audience, that this dude and this dude and this dude and she and her and him and him, they haven't won matches. So, like, if you look at WWE, they probably have the same problem, right? Like, but we don't really notice it as much.
They only start pointing it out when Bayley's been champion for over a year, which is fair enough. Point that out. That's great. But they don't sit there. The only time they've done that was when Kurt Hawkins was on his losing streak. But that was his gimmick at that point, was the losing streak. So fine, yeah, awesome, do that. With Peter Avalon and Brandon Cutler, part of their gimmick at that point was the losing streak. Great, do that. But stop pointing – I absolutely agree with you. They need to stop pointing out that these guys have lost all these matches. But even further to your point before, look at the tag team division. They brought out a lottery drum and just picked names out of it for who got to compete in a tournament to face FTR. What is the point at all of having these win-loss records if you're literally going to have a lottery? Like, it's utterly pure insanity.
For sure. And the problem with the win-loss record is, and I guess Vince McMahon knows this because he's been doing this way longer than Tony Khan, no offense, but it makes it hard to all of a sudden make an adjustment to a storyline because now you have to worry about the win-loss record, right? Because we know things happen. Like, for example, where's Brody Lee? So last week we were talking about this last week. Like, so we know why Cody lost the belt. Cody lost the belt because he had to go film a TV show and he needed someone to hold the belt while he was filming a TV show. So they give it to Brody Lee. But Brody Lee hasn't been on TV. He hasn't been on the YouTube channels. He hasn't been on Dark, Dynamite, BT, you name it. He's just nowhere to be found. So maybe, Brody lost the belt to Cody again because there's something we don't know that's happening backstage. Maybe maybe he has family issues to deal with. Maybe he's injured. We don't know. So that's the thing. Like, when I don't see Brody Lee, I'm like, shit, like, there's a lot of things that we, the audience, the fans, do not know. So let's say, for example, Santana and Ortiz are the number one ranked tag team, right? So they're supposed to wrestle FTR. But what if one of them gets injured? So now all of a sudden you need, like, are you just going to take the second place tag team? But what if the second place tag team's already busy in their own storyline? Like, that's the problem with the rankings. Like, because now all of a sudden you got to, like, whip up an idea to have so-and-so wrestle FTR, but there's no storyline leading into the pay-per-view, which therefore, I mean, at the end of the day, it's sports entertainment. So there's the, sport, like, of wrestling. Like, we actually want to see these guys in a ring and do what, like, they do. But then we want to see the storylines and the and so, like, that's what the rankings do not help in creating storylines. So at this point, a year in, maybe they should just, forget about the rankings. Like, just say, hey, you know what? It's not a good idea. Let's just forget about the rankings. And they don't even have to necessarily say it. They could just stop announcing the rankings, and in one day, it just disappears from the website.
Well, and let's be honest about this. Let's talk about the elephant in the room with rankings. We all love wrestling. We all know the truth of wrestling. These guys are great competitors. Nobody's going to call it, quote unquote, fake. But who's going to win the match is decided backstage. We all know this. Everybody knows we're going to push this guy. MJF's going to win this match, and we're just going to do it. How can rankings possibly matter? Even with kayfabe in mind, at this point, wrestling fans know enough about wrestling, for the most part, I hope, to know what the reality is. How can I, as a wrestling fan, legitimately care about rankings when the winner is predetermined? Like, they're in reality utterly meaningless.
Yeah. You see, when I first reviewed Dynamite, like, year one, I liked the idea of the rankings because it reminded me of when Goldberg was Goldberg in WCW and nobody could beat him. And so the big thing, like the big, not storyline, but what sold Goldberg, apart from the fact that he had this amazing finishing move, the jackhammer and the spear, and he was just a beast. And he would walk in with the security guards, and he was like a total package. Like, he had like an amazing entrance and a theme song and everything about him. But what was great about Goldberg, though, is he just didn't lose, right? He's like 10-0, 20-0, 25-0, 365 days. This guy has not been beat. Who will beat him? Like, that was the thing, right? Who will beat Goldberg?
Right. So streak is the gimmick. Yeah.
Right. So, but it works with a guy like Goldberg, or it works with a losing streak when you have two guys who lose week after week, like Cutler and Avalon, and you create a storyline around that. But having it for every single wrestler, who the hell cares? And clearly AEW does not care because they're not even respecting the rankings. Like, and also, who is, like, I want to know who is ranked the highest for the women's division, because from my understanding, Nyla Rose is just going to get the championship shot again, right? But she hasn't wrestled in weeks. Whereas
right now the rankings for the women's division are like, Hikaru Shida's the champion. She's 19-1 in 2020. And then the number one ranked after that is Nyla Rose at 11-2. But this is the part where maybe I just don't understand how rankings work. But then number 2 is Penelope Ford, who's at 9-5. Abaddon's number 3 at 5-1. But then Big Swole, who is at 10-4. She has one more win and one less loss at she's at number 4, yet is somehow 2 spots back from Penelope Ford. I don't understand how these rankings work. Maybe it's just me not getting it. It's probably just me, but it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, Nyla Rose is 11-2, so
yeah. That's fine. She should be, and she's the number 1 contender. Then I get that.
Big Swole is 10-4. Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why Penelope's number 2 when she's 9-5, and Big Swole's number 4 when she's 10-4. Like, I don't. That doesn't make sense to me. And even like their overall, Penelope's 11-8 and Big Swole's 12-9. So that's basically they basically negate each other. Like it's one of these things that I look at it and I look at them and I go, well, how are these rankings even work? Like the Natural Nightmares are 8-2. I don't remember the last time they had a tag team match. Surely there have been other tag teams wrestling. Like it's one of these things. Like I look at them and I go, and who and why? Like Brian Cage is the currently number 1 ranked person for like Jon Moxley is 20-0, Cody's 19-2-1. Okay, great. Brian Cage is 10-1. He's at the top of the pile, yet no one is talking about him for a championship match at all. He's not even in the conversation. What is the point? Like at that point, you really have to start asking why. Why is this even being recorded? And I agree with you completely about Goldberg. Like that streak, obviously incredible, but they did the same. And Asuka's streak at the time was amazing as well. But the problem becomes when you have a wrestler whose gimmick is tied to a streak, whether it's a win streak or a loss streak. What do you do with them after that streak ends? Like Goldberg floundered after that. He's never been the same since. That's reality. And it's taken Asuka a long time to get to a point where she was relevant again. Like, don't get me wrong, bad booking played a part in that. But you can't – when you're tied to this streak, then you've got a problem. And I worry about that for Brandon Cutler and Peter Avalon. Their whole thing in AEW, and I like both these guys, was around the fact that they hadn't won a match. They were 2 singles competitor losers put together as a loser tag team. Then they split as a loser tag team and had this series of insane matches where they both lost that built to this incredible match with freaking polyhedral dye on the ground and them suplexing each other into dye and books and stuff. It was insane. I loved it. But that's over now. Cutler's got his win. Their tag team's done. Their feud is over. What do you do with them now? Like everything you said about them is accurate. They're probably not going to be picking up any belts. Maybe someday one of them will pick up a tag team championship if they get paired with Wardlow. I don't know. But now when you lose these streaks, when that is the basis of your gimmick, when that's your storyline, when that comes to an end, it's really I've rarely seen wrestlers come back from that. It becomes very difficult. And as you just said, they've kind of tied everyone in the company to that same essential core gimmick of whatever their streak is at this point. So I just the whole thing has become so convoluted. They're doing everything they can to avoid it. They're having lotteries and tournaments that let people jump the line for these rankings. So yeah, I agree with you. Just let them go. Just say, okay, we're done. It's 2021. As of January 1st, 2021, AEW is eliminating rankings. We're just moving forward. Fine. Great. Do that.
Well, in regards to Brian Cage, like, he has the FTW belt, right?
I don't care about that.
I know. We don't. I'm just saying, so that's the thing. That's why AEW needs 1 or 2 more belts, because even this week they highlighted the women's championship from a different wrestling promotion.
They did.
Right? So I'm like, it seems like they care more about that championship than their own championship. So, again, it's only a year in. We're in year 2, technically, to start of year 2. They've only recorded, they haven't been around as long as, say, I don't know, Ring of Honor or WWE, whatever. They have a lot of work to do. I think having an additional hour show is going to help. I think bringing in an additional championship will help. It'll help with storylines. I think they're still trying to figure things out. They're testing things. They're trying new things. Yeah. But at the end of the day, here's the thing, right? I think Jim Cornette is, really harsh and annoying to listen to. And I think that I understand it's his gimmick or shtick or his personality, but a lot of times he actually says things that make total sense. It's just the way he says it. He comes across as a douchebag, pretty much, right? And when I listen to Jim Cornette, a lot of what he says is true. Not always, but more often than not, his criticisms, his critique and criticism are valid, right? I think at the end of the day, There's a reason why wrestling promotions do things a certain way. They've been doing it a certain way for like decades because it works. And they've tried doing different things. They try to do things like a ranking system, and it just doesn't work. And so they tried it and just like move on. And but here's the last thing I'm going to ask you, right? So let's say someone has like a really good record, or maybe like let's take Britt Baker as an example. She is 6-6, 6 wins, 6 losses in 2020, or is it 2020 or whatever? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's her 2020 record. Yeah.
Okay. So what if she gets injured, which she did, and so she can't wrestle for like 5 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 20 weeks, and that whole entire time she's not wrestling, so therefore she's not, improving her record. Meanwhile, Nyla's wrestling and I don't know, Rio's wrestling and Penelope Ford's wrestling, and so she comes back and all of a sudden they have like 10-2 or 15-3, and like, so what? You're gonna have to wait like an entire year for her to get enough wins so she's ranked high enough to be in a storyline to fight for the championship, even though she's technically the best, maybe not the best wrestler, but I think she's the best on the microphone when it comes to the women's division, right? Like, are you actually going to wait that long? Like, no, you're going to find a stupid way to get her to a championship run by, I don't know, having like a lottery or a tournament. Like, that's what they're doing. And so that's the thing, like there's so many things that happens at the last minute. Like you say, things are decided in advance. Yes, but we all know that things also change. Like minutes before they go into the ring, while they're wrestling, the fan reaction can sort of like decide. Not always. I mean, it's very rare, but there are times where the fan reaction will decide who the winner is. An injury, someone screws up, they injure themselves while wrestling. Like the referee screws up. Maybe the wrestler didn't get out of the 3 count in time, so they actually lost the match, but they were supposed to win a match. Like, anything can happen, right? And so the rankings, at the end of the day, bottom line is it complicates things. It doesn't really add anything in terms of like entertainment or stories, and so it's kind of like useless. And it might look good if you say, hey, Brian Cage is 20-1. This guy's a beast. Okay, but we don't really need those specific numbers to know that he's a great wrestler and you should be pushing him.
Well, that's exactly correct. Going back to Goldberg, he didn't win that many matches. I mean, for him to have won the many, like his number would jump between episodes of Nitro by like 12. He would have had for his numbers to be what they were. He would have had to have wrestled 12 matches between Monday and Monday in some of those cases. And that's been something that's been pointed out numerous times. Anybody who was watching Nitro back in the day, including myself, would have noticed that as well. They don't have to actually have won or lost these matches. They can just say, oh yeah, Brian Cage won 45 matches this week. Who cares? And to your point about anything can happen, yeah, but 95% of the time the match is decided before they walk out there. Yeah, 5% of the time things can change, but it's still most of the time they know what's going to happen. It's the simple point is what it comes down to is they don't matter. They're irrelevant. They were irrelevant for moment one, and I just can't bring myself to care about them. They confuse the issue. And once you reach the point that you've created these rankings, now you're week to week trying to find ways to undercut them. Why do you even have them anymore? Who cares?
You want to know how silly this looks? Okay, so Marco Stunt is 2-5 for singles in 2020, right? And he's 2-1 in tag teams, and he's 7-3 in trios. So basically, Marco Stunt has been in 10 trio matches, 3 tag team matches, and 7 singles matches. So let's compare him to, I don't know, Matt Hardy? Matt Hardy's 3-1. Like, so basically, and then let's look at Miro. Miro's 0-0. He's 2-0 for tag teams, but 0-0 for singles. And then let's look at, I don't know, let's look at Pac, who, by the way, is coming back this week. He's 3-2. Ooh. Like, I know COVID, like, screwed things up for him, but
no, totally.
But the point is, so when you look at these numbers, right? 9-7 for Sammy, 10-2 for Ricky Starks, 0-2 for Santana. What it does is it sort of also highlights how unbalanced it is in terms of like who gets screen time, and when are these people getting screen time? When is Luther wrestling 9 matches? I've seen him in Dynamite once with Jericho for the anniversary, and the rest are on Dark. Like, so like it's just weird. Like it highlights like, oh yeah, you got so and so in the roster, but you're not even using so and so. which, especially when it comes to the women's division, really highlights a lot of the problems with the women's division. The fact that they don't actually use the wrestlers and actually put them in the ring, put them in the spotlight, put them in front of cameras, especially on TV shows like Dynamite.
No, with you 100%. I don't want to start a whole new topic here, but I want to say very quickly, I'm interested if Pac's coming back this week. Like when the COVID hit, when the pandemic hit, he was involved in he and the Lucha Bros had a team. They were a trio. They were Death Triangle or whatever they were called. And now since then, they're now those two boys are now part of Eddie Kingston's little family. So what happens to Pac when he comes back? Is Death Triangle just done? I'm curious to see. Like I said, I don't want to start a whole new topic now. I'm just curious to see what they do with him now.
Yeah, I don't know.
It'll be interesting.
Wait, but and I gotta say one more thing too, and I don't want to start a whole new topic. And next week, we're already booked because we're doing our predictions. We're gonna do our AEW sort of like recap, Dynamite recap. But the thing is like, when you were talking about who they seem to give more screen time to and who gets more wins, I feel like, okay, just because you've been wrestling for 20 years and you're friends with whoever, like I get the whole sort of like way of thinking where like, well, this guy's been doing it for 20 years. Let's give him a push, like he's been doing the indie scene for like so long, like he deserves a chance at the spotlight. Like I get it. But so does the younger dudes. And like if you bring in a guy who's never wrestled on television before, but he's just incredible. If he's incredible, he's incredible. You can't deny his talent. He shouldn't be penalized because he doesn't have 20 years of experience. You know what I mean? Like if I go for a job interview and I have like 10 years of experience working online marketing and they bring in a guy who has like a year, but he's way better at me at Photoshop and social media and writing or whatever, like why wouldn't they hire him? Like if he's better, he's better. It doesn't matter if I have 10 years of experience.
No, I'm with you 100%, and that's the direction AEW should be going. That's what I wanted from them. I wanted to see younger talent get a shot, and they need to remember that that's where their bread and butter is. But I think our time has more or less come to an end for today. One last thing I want to do before we go. We talked very briefly about the NWA Women's Championship being defended on Dynamite this week. I just want to say congratulations to Serena Deeb. I've been a big fan of hers for a long time, and it's awesome to see her with that strap over her shoulder when she came down to the ring. I am a huge fan of her and her work. I'm just very happy for her, and I'm happy to see her get these shots both on NWA and on AEW.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if Thunder Rosa actually goes to a different promotion like WWE, because clearly she's not coming to AEW. They made it very clear this week.
Yeah, they're very not interested in her, and that's a mistake that may bite them in the ass in the long run.
Or it might bite her in the ass because she can go to WWE and not win a match because Charlotte Flair always wins the championship belt type thing.
Yeah, that could happen too. But that brings us to the end of Talk AEW for today. A big thank you, of course, goes to editor-in-chief of Goombastomp.com and TiltMagazine.net, Ricky D.
Yes, and hopefully Mariko can be back next week so we can come up with some crazy nicknames. And I would like to remind everybody you can find the podcast as well as Ian's weekly AEW coverage over at Goombastomp.com. And you can find links to where you can listen to the podcast online, including YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, and Spotify. We're not the type of people who feel like we need like 20,000 social media accounts just to promote a wrestling podcast. We know there's like thousands of wrestling podcasts out there, most of which are on YouTube. We're trying to offer something that's audio-based for people who want to listen to a podcast on the go, for example. If you like the show, give us a rating. You can give us a rating on iTunes. And I guess that's about it. You can leave us a comment on the website. And I am on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Sorted Cinema, which is the movie podcast I do. But I do tweet about wrestling more so than I do about movies.
And I'm Ian Goodwill. You can find us all on the major social media. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.